Good afternoon to all. First, this is a trifocal challenge session. Before that, we have a special keynote address by Dr. Nazrul Islam. He is a professor and renowned glaucoma specialist from Bangladesh Eye Hospital. He is also a very good phacosurgeon. He is former head of ophthalmology department of BIRDEM Hospital, Dhaka, Bangladesh. So he specialized in laser cataract surgery and is also director of Bangladesh Eye Hospital, which is dedicated eye hospital and with a state-of-the-art facility. Can we have his video presentation?
Thanks to the All India Ophthalmological Society for the kind invitation. I am Dr. Nazrul Islam. I work in Dhaka at Bangladesh Eye Hospital. In next few minutes, I shall share the economic MIGS for the developing country. I do not have any financial disclosure. If we look at the study of global prevalence of glaucoma, in 2020, it was 76 million. But in 2040, it will be around 112 million. And definitely, we have to deal with all these glaucoma patients, including screening, treatment, and related public health strategies. What is the treatment? Till now, we have the treatment of decrease of intraocular pressure, mostly in its target pressure. And of course, we have the anti-glaucoma medications for that. We have a laser, we have surgeries, and sometimes you have to use all SGM, laser, and surgeries. If we look to these surgeries, we see that many kind of surgeries are there. The traditional filtration surgery, tube implant, is less used in the developed country and has been a paradigm shift with the mixed procedure. And if we look, there are some mix which is equally good, like the TRAB for the decrease of intraocular pressure, including the in-focus, deep sclerectomy, Zen implant. Even for the moderate or intermediate glaucoma cases, you can use the GAT, ab interno canaloplasty, hydras, high stent, trabectome, Kahug dual blade, etc. The problem is the mix is high priced. It's not available in the developing country. It's not good for the very advanced refractory glaucoma cases, and it needs long learning curve. Though the mix, most important part is the quick procedure, rapid recovery, and increases the lifestyle changes. It's a really good thing for the mix. Now going to another mix is the Kahug dual blade. It's really very easy. After the cataract surgery, after phacoemulsification, lens implantation, put some pilocarpine inside the eye, make the iris constricted, and you can open the angle by surgical gonioscope, and you can see the angle nicely. And if the angle is wide open, definitely you can excise some part of the trabecular meshwork, maybe 90 to 110 degree. And you can see here, when the cut, you can see the very nice trabecular meshwork is excised from here. And again, if you cut from the other side, you see here, after excising the trabecular meshwork, you see very nicely the area is open. So that trabecular aqueous humor can pass through the trabecular meshwork very easily. Again, the Kahug dual blade has been proved to be effective in the mild to moderate glaucoma cases, but it is expensive, about $300 to $400, which is not affordable in the developing country. Fortunately, in 1919, in the American Academy of Ophthalmology, Dr. Ashraf Saibani showed a very cheaper method of goniectomy by a needle bending a needle. He called it BENG, or bent ab interno needle goniectomy. I have done few cases, and the result is not inferior to the Kahug dual blade. You can see very nicely, you can take the trabecular meshwork simple by a bent needle. Similar like the Kahug dual blade, You can do it 100 to 110 degree from this type to other type by a simple incision. By a single incision, it is possible. If you want to more, you have to give another incision. And if you look to the comment by Dr. Aik Ahmed, Dr. David Richardson, they advocated this is the cheapest mix and it can replace the Kahook dual blade in the developing country. Now coming to Prolene GAT, it is usually done by illuminated catheter, which is really expensive and one-time use. But thanks to Dr. D.S. Grover, he has shown us you can use the 5-Prolene by making its one end smooth, makes a mushroom shape by a low temp cautery, then open the trabecular meshwork Schlemm's canal and put the 5-Prolene in the Schlemm's canal from on end to other end, then bring the whole both ends outside and automatically it cuts the 360 degree of the trabecular meshwork. So trabeculotomy of 360 degree is done and it is really good for the children, for the pediatric glaucoma, even good for the gives good result for the adult glaucoma cases. This is the ab externo trabeculotomy. It is the same procedure but doing ab externo. You have to open the Schlemm's canal and similarly 5-Prolene, you have to make a mushroom shaped head and by the low temp cautery. Then this end is entered in the Schlemm's canal. Slowly and steadily it goes in the Schlemm's canal and after 16-17 going, usually it comes the other end from the other side. And when you find the other end, you hold both ends and bring together outside. It cuts the whole 360 degree of the trabecular meshwork. Similar to GAT, it also cuts the same way, but only thing it is external. This is comparatively easier, less learning curve than the GAT. So result is almost same. It also can be useful for the pediatric glaucoma and also for the adult glaucoma cases. Now coming the mix for the angle closure glaucoma. We know that viscogonioplasty is very simple procedure. If there is apposition angle closure, if there is cynical angle closure, easily it can separate from the angle closure. And this way, many angle closure glaucoma cases have better IOP control postoperatively. Most of the time, we do it along with the phaco. After doing the phaco, emulsification, put the implant, give some pilocarpine, and give the high density viscoelastic. Usually I use the Biscote, which has the dispersive quality. It protects the corneal endothelium and also forms the anterior chamber. And after putting all around the viscoelastic, we can use a simple spatula. And with this spatula, go to the periphery of the iris, push down, simply push down all over, at least 10 to 12 places all over in 12 o'clock position in every 1 o'clock. Then you can see the iris is separated from its periphery, and if there is any synechia, that also extended. And after that, definitely we must wash it thoroughly so that in postoperative IOP is not an issue. Lastly, goniosynuclesis. In such study, it has been seen that goniosynuclesis actually decreases IOP. Here, Tian and Tian et al. Found the effect of phacoemulsification plus goniosynuclesis in acute and chronic angle closure patients with extensive goniosynechia. Yes, they found the topical and systemic anti-glaucoma medication drug required decreased in both the groups. So it is really helpful in some cases. In another study by Ji Guo and Fang Zhang, they also found that phaco along with the goniosynuclesis is advantageous for the extent of pass compared with the phaco alone at a 12-month follow-up. You can do the goniosynuclesis by microforceps or by the spatula. If you use the microforceps, usually it is pulling towards center, and most of the time it causes some hyphema. Then by the spatula, you don't have to pull, just press down in the peripheral part of that. Sing with the surgical gonioscope. Usually the Swan-Jacob gonioscope I'm using here, but of course you can use the other surgical direct gonio lens so that you can see directly the angle and push it peripheral part, and ultimately if there is any synechia is separated. And after that, definitely you have to wash thoroughly so that postoperatively there is no high IOP. So in conclusion, I'll say that MIGS are a large part of glaucoma practice now, mostly in the developed world. One of the important part is the mix can help a lifestyle change in a patient's, especially in the early glaucoma. So in the developing country, the Prolin-GAT 360 ab externo trabeculotomy, bent ab interno needle goniectomy, viscogonioplasty, goniosanicolysis are the very economic procedure, mix, and can be useful to decrease the IOP. We do hope the expensive mix also will be available in the developing country soon in an affordable price for the service of our glaucoma patients. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nazrul Islam, sir. You are here. You want
I'm here. Yeah. Thank you very much for playing my video. Thank you.
No problem, sir. So it's our pleasure. Do you want to share anything more in addition to what you have shown?
It's all right. It's all right. If you have anything to ask, I can answer. Do you have any query? Any query? Then I can answer because I'm the OT. Only comment I want to make here that India, Bangladesh are almost the same socioeconomic condition. We must learn some kind of mix so that we should not be behind the developed country. That is our goal. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Now we will start our trifocal challenge session. So this session will help people understand the trifocal technology and how to improve on the using the lenses and to give greatest vision for the patients. So this course has many of the stalwarts in ophthalmology who have joined us from Dr. Almorivarman, Dr. Ramesh, Dr. Kumaran, and Dr. Preeti. So I invite you all and the other members who are watching this session to this very interesting course on trifocals. So the trifocal course starts with an introduction by myself and then followed by talks by Dr. Almorivarman, followed by Dr. Preeti on achieving the biometry. And then Dr. Kumaran will explain the cord length, which is very, very important, especially in terms of bifocal and trifocal surgeries. And then we will have the talk by Dr. Ramesh, and then I will conclude the session with some post-operative ways to minimize problem with the patient eye care. So now I'll be starting the session with an introduction to the trifocals. So I'm Arvind. I do cataract refractive surgery and to some extent corneal work. So whenever I look at patients and whatever I want to do, I personally like being unique, like having my own style and also have my own opinions, like my own toothbrush. So this is a very, very famous quote. So when you look at adapting technologies, we need to adapt to different technologies. As it evolves, definitely we need to evolve, we need to accommodate it, and we have to adjust to it and then make it very successful in our hand. This is the most important thing. When you can see this cell phone from a brick in your hand to a nice slate, which is a very, very powerful computer today. This is the evolution that has happened with technology. Same thing that is happening in the eye also. We all know that we started with ICC, ECC, intraocular lens, everything. And now that even laser surgery has come into being with micro incision cataract surgery and excellent materials on intraocular lenses, we have one of the best intraocular lenses today. But is it enough? Are we catering to all patients and their desires? Are we closer to what nature can give you? No. So when we look at newer technologies, what do we expect from a newer technology? Any new technology means it has to increase the comfort. It should be easier to handle, which is most important thing. A novelty is also needed, because unless there is novelty, there won't be many people who will come and take up the new technology. And the most important thing is, any new technology should improve the quality of life. These are the most important aspects why we choose newer technologies. Similarly, the new technology in intraocular lenses in the last few years, which has improved tremendously, is the trifocal. And in my practice, the use of trifocals has increased multifold. Why this trifocal is easier to handle for everyone? This is not entirely different. This lens is based on the standard acrylic hydrophobic materials or hydrophobic coat on hydrophilic material. The same lenses which we handle day in and day out. So there is nothing new in handling these lenses. They're also based on the diffractive technology, which was used in bifocals earlier. I was talking bifocal means the multifocals which we were using earlier. Actually, it is a misnomer, because all the multifocals are actually bifocal. They have only distance vision and reading vision. So before we look at trifocals, how do we use our vision? So we use our vision for distance, reading, and then came the technology evolution of computers and related products, which has increased our focus on intermediate usage of vision. Previously, the intermediate vision was very much restricted maybe to a few carpenters or people who are doing engineering mapping and things like that. It became a household thing that we all need intermediate vision nowadays. So trifocal is one category that gives you an extended depth of vision from reading till distance, almost a continuous vision, not though completely continuous. The fundamental is, when you want to use a new technology, you need to understand the technology. What is the need for it? Technology. Here we need intermediate vision. We need to understand how it works. Then we have to choose who is the best suited for this technology, and convince the patient what he is getting is the best. So when you look at what are all the tasks which we do on the range of vision at which we use, when you look at reading a tablet, it's around 40 centimeters. Laptop computer is around 45, computer monitor is around 60 to 70, playing cards is 70, automobile navigation is around 70, and shaving is maybe 70 or 60 depending on different people. So when you look at it from the reading to computer, most of it comes in this 40 to 60 centimeter range. So we need to have excellent vision at 40 centimeters and similarly around 60 centimeters. That is the reason. Nowadays, whatever the data has come out, 60% of the time, we use intermediate vision nowadays, especially after the onset of COVID. Our usage of intermediate vision, near to intermediate, has increased many fold. So we cannot tell a patient that we won't give you intermediate distance vision. Excuse me? So once you look at diffractive technology, what is the different step height causes the diffraction? So when you look at the trifocal technology, it has 3 steps. One, this is the curvature of a normal spherical. This is one step and this is one step. Normally, this there is a technology which has come now, quadrifocal technology, where there are the spherical focal point for distance, followed by 3 kind of diffractive rings. This is a quadrifocal technology. So there are actually 3 add powers in that. So when you have a quadrifocal lens, with a bottomed out third peak, then it will have a trifocal without much loss of vision. So this is another thing which we need to understand. When you have a diffractive ring, the prism base, if the prism base is more, you have a much nearer focal point. If the prism base is large, then you have a shorter focal point. So that means that if the prism base is small, then you have a higher hat. If you see that the prism base is higher, then you will have a higher focal point. That means that it gives you intermediate vision. Normally, the distance, the intermediate and reading should be around 50% of each other to avoid much of the glare and halos and less loss of light to the patients. So why then trifocals? The patients are seeing much better than with any other lenses we have offered till date. We can give a whole range of visions. The problems are actually lesser than with the bifocals. The first generation of the lenses started with Physiol IOL, followed by Carl Zeiss, and then came the panoptic lenses. So whatever lenses we have, there are many imported lenses and also some of the lenses that are manufactured by IOCare and Biotech, which are lenses which are manufactured in India. And now we have a lens called Synergy by Johnson & Johnson, which is like a trifocal, which has extended depth of vision and superimposed diffraction. So that's what is happening. This slide is very, very important. When you look at different lenses, there are 3-4 things which is very important. One is the size of the diffractive part. When you look at it, now all the lenses are between 4 and 4.5 diopters. Some of the lenses are till 5 diopters. The ideal range will be 4.5 millimeters, sorry. That is very important because it gives pupil independence. Even if the pupil is very small, they get good intermediate and reading vision. Even if the pupil is large, they don't have much loss in mesopic vision. So that is very important. Then the second thing which is very important is when you look at the light yield, now the lenses all around 85 to 90% light yield, which is like almost close to monofocal lenses. Even if you look at monofocal lenses, there will be some loss of light, which is not clearly published. But the thing is, the trifocal lenses, the light loss is as minimal as possible compared to even single vision lenses. So different lenses have little difference in intermediate and distance. So when you look at it, there are 5 important things which you have to do to have a good trifocal implant. One, you should be a good phacosurgeon. You should be always able to do a good rhexis, put the IOL into the bag. Most important thing. But inside, you have to remember that this is yet another procedure. No need to be, feel very strained about it. We are doing a very big lens. No, this is yet another lens. Only thing you prepare for it. Always put the incision on the steep axis to avoid induced astigmatism. Keep the IOL always in the bag. This is very, very important. Center it on the pupil. If there is any doubt, use a CTR. So now I'm just going to stop here because I have another part which I will be doing at the end of the session. So this is about introduction to trifocal lenses. So now that I have completed my first part, is there any other questions or any other comments to add on here, Kumaran or Dr. Ramesh?
Yeah, I think we could finish the talks and then we could take the questions in the end.
Yeah.
Dr. Ramesh, do you want to do now or do you want to do your session later?
No,
because
I just quote Kumar. I'll do it at the last, please.
you will do the last.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, what is more important, as I have told you, choosing the lens, we have done a trifocal, but we have to make sure that lens is perfect, dot on, with zero error.
Can I request you to start your screen sharing again?
Now I will request Dr. Preeti, who will be talking about the biometry, refining the biometry for these lenses. Dr. Preeti is a consultant at Agarwal's Eye Hospital in Hyderabad. She is a very young, energetic, excellent phacosurgeon. She has presented in many conferences. Here she is going to give us idea about how to do excellent biometry for these excellent lenses. Welcome, Dr. Preeti.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, very much.
Yeah. A very good afternoon to all the delegates who are watching this instruction course live. I thank Dr. Arvind for giving me an opportunity to be a part of his instruction course as a co-instructor. My warm regards to my other co-instructors, Dr. Arulmozhi Varman sir, Dr. Kumaran, and Dr. Ramesh sir. Today, my topic is going to be refining biometry for zero prediction error in presbyopic correcting IOL. I will be sharing my screen. Just a second. Is my screen visible?
Yes, ma'am. It's visible. You can start.
Yeah. So I'm Dr. Preeti and I'm at Hyderabad currently. And see, let me begin my topic telling you when did this all begin? Why is it important to even refine? And how are we going to do this? So Ridley, in his 1952 paper itself, which is around 70 years back, he has described the new technique of intraocular lens implantation, and he has documented outcomes after cataract surgery with IOL implantation. And we have come a very far way from that time onwards. And so in today's scenario, how can we define biometry? So I would like to define biometry now as a process of measuring all the biological measurable entities of the eye and incorporating the values of which we can determine the intraocular lens power to be implanted to attain the target postoperative refraction. So we started with measuring the corneal power and the axial length, but now we can measure the anticatometry, the total catometry, the central corneal thickness, the antechamber depth, the lens thickness, the white to white, and the axial length. So inaccuracies in either of these measurements will lead to unprecedented and unpredicted postoperative error, but which contributes the most, we all should know. In the study in 1994, it was told that 54% of the error were attributed to axial length errors. And in 2018, it has changed a bit, and studies have said that prediction of postoperative AC depth is the #1 source of error for postoperative refraction prediction. So we should also know what is a prediction error. The biometric prediction error is actually defined as the difference between intended refraction determined from preoperative biometry data and the spherical equivalent of the postoperative subjective refraction. So to say in a line, the prediction is equal to actual outcome minus predicted target. So why are we talking about prediction errors? Because these are taken as index to measure the performance of each calculation method for determining IOL power to be implanted. So, and what is a zero prediction error? Suppose our biometry and IOL prediction were perfect, then the prediction error for every eye would be 0. And the mean error and the absolute error for all patients having cataract surgery would also be 0. We are not yet there. So in the recent study, it was estimated that the lowest mean absolute error, which is achievable with the current method, is between 0.36 and 0.4. So why are we talking about zero error in a presbyopic IOL? That is because what we are aiming is for a glass-free vision. So we need to have it on the dot to have this. So we need to predict hemetropia, and postoperatively, the refractive residue should also be as predicted. So that is what is zero prediction error. So then let us go on to how
Is this star broken for me or others as well?
Yeah, I think there is a pause as the video is frozen. Nikhil, can you look into it?
It's not.
I think the
video that
internet
is-
connectivity over there has stopped.
It's not video that's frozen. The connectivity and Dr.
Connectivity is gone.
It's, an issue.
Okay, I will call.
In the meanwhile, can we start with the next presenter? And the moment she comes back on, we will have to get her back in. There she is.
Yeah. Your internet is gone, Preeti.
She's back, so let's just ask her to unmute and start her screen sharing again. Could you start your screen sharing again, ma'am?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Where did I get disconnected?
Maybe one or two slides before.
Okay, am I okay now?
Yes, you're audible, loud and clear.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was not aware that it had disconnected.
You can go ahead, ma'am, now.
Yeah, but I think I'm I need to reshare. I'll stop share and reshare again.
No, no, it was
No,
seen.
no, you are there. You are there.
Okay, I'm sorry about it. Slides visible?
Yes.
Yes.
So I would like to take it through as man, machine, and methods for the refining of biometry. So the machine technology, refractive cataract surgery under codes is actually began with the advent of optical biometer. So and the better technology has led on to measuring better measurements, and we need to refine it more, and so it becomes a vicious circle. The optical, as per the NIC guideline, we need to have the optical biometry as the gold standard to measure the axial length. So these are all the various machines which are available in the recent era. The IL Master 500 with its various upgradation, the Lenstar 900, the IL Master 700 or swept source OCT methods, and other few swept source OCT methods which give us the most precise measurements. And the man behind the machine is very important as well. So they have to be taught what has to be measured. So they have to be taught that minimum 5 readings have to be taken and look at the precision where it is being focused. And they also have to look at the waveforms or the signal noise ratio. Any signal noise ratio which is more than 2 is good, and which is less than 1.6 is not usable. And there's also another tip wherein you can use a glass in patients with extreme myopia or hypermetropia for a better fixation. And currently, we also have the composite graphs which give us the traffic light signal. If there is a green light which is coming above the SNR ratio, it means we are good to go. And this is a measurement by swept source OCT, wherein we can even see if it is passing through the fovea. So the technician has to be told that when they are taking the scan, the axial length measurement has to pass through this foveal center. We need to have the fixation check done, and then we can measure it. While measuring the AC depth, the single point which has to be sharp has to fall within this within this box which is seen here, and then the measurements have to be taken. And then we all know now that we are measuring various things, and all these can be measured with the latest optical biometry. So as I said before, there are around 7 parameters which can actually be measured. And the Lenstar scores a little over the other IL Master 500 because it can measure few readings more than the IL Master as well. So though we say about the IL Master, a very good immersion is as good as the IL Master in average and normal cases. So the technician should also know where he can refine while doing the immersion scans as well. As we know, because 1 millimeter of variation can give us around 2 diopters of difference, is absolutely unacceptable with respect to presbyopia correcting IOLs. The position of the probe has to be perfect. It has to be exactly as shown in this picture to avoid improper light deflections. And the technician has to be properly trained to look at the spike amplitudes and the spike characters in each of the scan which they measure. Missing any of this could lead to trouble. So what are the validation guidelines? If the axial length measurement is less than 21 or more than 26, you need to repeat. Difference greater than 0.3 millimeters, the SNR ratio and the waveform is bad, then we need to repeat. Axial length corresponds poorly to clinical data, then there is a need to repeat. And greater than or equal to 1 diopter between the two eyes, and the difficulty in measurement is there, definitely we need we have less number of people with IOL Master. Whenever we are planning a good lens, it's always prudent. Am I audible?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, it's always prudent to refer it to somebody who has the machine in place, get the measurement and do it. Though if your percentage of premium intraocular lenses are less, this has to be a habit so that it is important. And those who have the machine have to calibrate the machine. And one more tip is you can patch each eye for a better fixation, and always scan both eyes even if it is a pseudophakic eye. And coming on to refining keratometry, so we know that these are all the various keratometers which are available. The manual keratometer which we are using. I'll take a little time, just another minute or so, and the topography cannot be avoided in
Preeti, your internet is gone.
I guess ma'am has having some connectivity issues.
Yeah. So I think you can go ahead with the next speaker, Arvind, so she can join back.
Okay. So the next speaker is Dr. Kumaran. He is the managing director of Kumaran Eye Institute in Chennai. He is an excellent phaco surgeon. He is one of the specialists in presbyopic correction, and he has about 80% presbyopic practice correction using intraocular lenses. And he is also one of the very important key persons in propagating NABH and the NABH standards in Chennai. So welcome, Dr. Kumaran. Take care.
Good afternoon. I hope you are visible and audible.
Yes, Kumaran, very much.
So good afternoon and a warm welcome to all. It is a pleasure to be a part of this IC in this pandemic and in the virtual meet. So my topic for the day is trifocal challenge. Is chord length mu an important factor in presbyopic IOL surgery? See, presbyopic correcting IOLs, there are a lot of IOLs available at present, and the latest generation trifocals and the hybrid lenses are the one which has hit the market for quite some time. A lot has been talked about how accurate we can be with these presbyopic IOL, with the way we have to calculate the biometry, how to do a surgical technique to get a successful surgery. But still, a lot of surgeons all over India are a little bit skeptical about adopting a presbyopic IOL for the patients, for a simple fact that they are scared about the post-operative refractive outcome, or they're also worried about the dysphotopsias the patient could complain of after the surgery. We have seen a lot of patients, 6/6 and N6, still this pupillary axis and visual axis do not coincide, and there's always a difference. A difference is more when the patient has a phoria or a tropia where it is enlarged. So whenever we look into the biometry, we usually look into the axial length, make sure that all the spikes are quite good, and then we look into the astigmatism. Most of the surgeons stop at this level, and it is most enough for a normal IOL. But when you're going into a presbyopic IOLs, you also have to go down and look into the chord length mu, which is denoted in all the optical biometer nowadays. So the chord length mu is a measure of the deviation from the pupillary axis in the X and the Y axis. Both have to be added together to give you the difference in chord length mu. And the chord length mu actually varies in different pupil sizes, mesopic, scotopic, and photopic vision. It is always a good practice to measure the deviation of the chord length mu in all these different lighting conditions. And when you have a deviation of more than 1 millimeter, you have to be really careful, because these are the patients, when you give them a 6/6 vision, they still complain of dysphotopsia because of the variation in the center of the pupil and the visual axis. And see, as I told you, in a perfectly centered capsular rhexis, the IOL normally centers itself in the back. So most of this has to be decided preoperatively whether this patient has to get an IOL, this presbyopic correcting IOL or not. But however, when you have a compromise in the capsular rhexis margin, the IOL can change its position. The only lens where you need not look into the IOL centration are the PMMA lenses or the spherical lenses. But nowadays, the spherical lenses are not used much. So most of the lenses are aspherical lenses, and for all aspherical lenses, you need an IOL centration, including more so when you're using a toric lenses or the multifocal lenses. As I told you earlier, though the IOL is going to center itself in the center of the back, it is always a good practice to make sure that the IOL is centered with the optical axis. This we do by coinciding the Purkinje images 1 and 4. So define what a Purkinje images are and how useful it is in surgery. The 1, 2, and 3 Purkinje images are real and errate because they are reflected from a convex surface. The Purkinje image 4 is from a concave surface, hence it is the only image which is real and inverted. So this is how the Purkinje images looks like when we do the 3. So as you could see here, this is a trifocal one. The Purkinje image 2 actually is not visible because it forms the center of the anterior chamber. So all we have to do is to align the Purkinje image 1 and 4 as shown here. Different microscopes have different to define these Purkinje images. Here, this is from a Vishu 160 microscope, which shows you two dots, one larger and bigger, which are used to coincide both the optical and the visual axis and at the end of the surgery to ensure that the IOL is placed in the center. So this is an image of the post-operative where you could find these trifocal IOLs well centered and the optic and visual axis almost coinciding. So to come back about the importance of chord length mu, this is a very important study which showed that they took people into 3 groups. The first group had a chord length mu of less than 0.2, the second somewhere between 0.2 and 0.4, and the third was between 0.4 and 0.6. The most important thing, note that all these patients in this group were emmetropic or they had very good vision or spectacle independence. But when you ask these patients about the dysphotopsia through a questionnaire, it was found that the patients in group C, that is the patients who had a large amount of chord length mu, did complain of disturbing glare and halos. So the take-home point is that your chord length mu is not going to disturb your prediction error, but it is going to play an important role in giving satisfaction to the patient and reducing the dysphotopsias. So you can go ahead safely and implant these presbyopic lenses when you have a chord length mu of less than 0.4. If they are more than 0.4, be prepared to deal with the dysphotopsias which the patient is going to complain of. Thank you.
Thank you, Kumaran. It was a very nice presentation. You enlightened us on the chord length, which is very, very important in current day refractive surgery.
Yes.
So now we'll go on to the next speaker. The next speaker is a very, very well world-renowned phaco surgeon. He is Dr. Arun Mozhivarman from Chennai. He doesn't need any introduction. He is very, very well known across the world. He is a very famous refractive surgeon as well, and he has a very keen eye for newer technologies, and he adopts to newer technologies early on at every juncture. So he will enlighten us with his talk on trifocal IOL surgery. Arun Mozhivarman, sir, please welcome.
Thank you, Arvind. Is my screen visible?
Yes, sir. Visible.
Thank you. So my talk is going to be on fine-tuning for trifocals. There's going to be some kind of an overlap with the previous 2 speakers, including Dr. Arvind's introduction. Okay, we progressed. The first multifocal IOLs were truly multifocal. They were refractive. From there on, we went on to diffractive bifocals, then EDOF, diffractive trifocals. We have a diffractive refractive trifocal, and we have hybrid trifocals. This has been the growth along this path now. We are somewhere at this point now. We have the diffractive trifocals. We have a combination now of a few of the lenses, and even hybrid that brings in the EDOF and the trifocal. Why are we going in this direction? Basically, whatever issues that we had with the refractive multifocals, they were true multifocals, was the high photic phenomena difficulties was removed by the diffractive bifocals. But diffractive bifocals gave rise to 2 issues. Photic phenomena still were there. They could be a little lesser than what was there with the refractive lenses. But then you had 2 clear visual points, distance and near, but you did not have intermediate. So trifocal removes the issues faced by bifocals. You get clear vision over all distances, distance, intermediate, and near. Photic phenomena, though not completely removed, are lesser than what you would see with a diffractive bifocal. The defocus curve of any trifocal lens is almost the gold standard that we're looking for. We want a flat curve. This is what we get. You start at plano. Even if you go towards plus, there is a certain amount of tolerance. And as we keep going towards minus, right up to 1.52, it is. Then from 2 onwards, it goes flat right up to 3. So you get almost a flat curve, which at the tail peters off somewhere around here. So you have this ability for this trifocal lens to give you a good quality of vision over all distances. That's the quantity. Then coming to better quality of vision. Quality of vision can be judged primarily by the amount of contrast sensitivity a lens would give you. Contrast sensitivity is a difficult test to perform. There are multiple ways of looking at it, and you have subjective valuations there. But looking at just MTF curves will give you a very good idea as to how the quality of vision would be. A typical MTF from a bifocal is what appears like this, while from the trifocal is almost equivalent to a monofocal. So we can decide that the trifocal gives you the good quantity of vision over all distances, as well as good quality of vision. But photic phenomena are still present. That is something that we're addressing with the hybrid lenses. How do we now fine-tune? Fine-tuning starts preoperatively, goes on during the surgery, and also post-operatively. Most important, preoperatively, as an important point, fine-tune everything there. Check ocular surface. This is where all of us make mistakes. A simple test of TBUT will tell you whether this person has got any problem with his ocular surface. The very fact that you put dye will let you know whether the epithelium is healthy or not healthy, and the time between the tear breakup time will tell you whether the person is suffering from any kind of a Meibomian gland-induced dry eye, which is very, very, very common. If either of these things, either ocular surface is not good, irregular, or there is short TBUT, please address this early, because most immediately after the surgery is over, this dry eyes problem will exacerbate and give you a very unhappy patient, because though the quantity of vision is very good, quality is poor. So attend to all ocular surface and dry eye issues preoperatively. Worse the condition is, attend to it for a longer period, make it right before you attempt surgery. Counseling is extremely important here. Appropriate and meticulous counseling has to be done, because after everything that you've done, there are some minor issues on photic phenomena, quality of vision, and the vision that he or the patient perceives that they would get and what they actually get. So spending time and counseling them and spending a little more chair time is very important in preparing these patients so that they don't have an issue. Please counsel to get the other eye done, because the most satisfied patients are the ones that are implanted bilaterally. So it's very, very important that we do a proper counseling too. Of course, already been spoken about, the refractive outcome should be perfect. The tolerance is very low. 0.75 plus or minus is already too bad. We should be well below 0.5. We should be aiming for plus or minus 0.25. So this can be done by addressing both the sphere and the cylinder. Even if there's a 0.75 cylinder, please address it by LRI. Anything more than 0.75 or 1, please address it by toric IOL. Optical biometry has already been talked about. Today's gold standard is going to be a SwepSource OCT-based optical biometer. Whichever model you prefer, whichever company, I have no personal interest and no financial interest, but I use the IOL Master 700. I'm very happy with it. This would give you spot-on calculations and the best results. They are very, very, very important. Yes, Komaran has already spoken about the mu. Angle alpha and angle kappa workup is something that is combined with the mu. So angle kappa, I really don't personally give too much importance. Angle alpha tells you the visual axis against where the lens will center. Lens will center on the bag. Bag is demarcated fairly accurately by the white to white or the limbus. So center of the limbus and the visual axis, if they are separated by more than 0.5 millimeters, you could end up with an unhappy patient. I would use the word could, because not all these patients with a large angle alpha are unhappy, some of them are. So it would be ideal to choose a trifocal IOL with a larger central ring in people who have got a large angle alpha, or if the angle alpha more than 0.5 millimeters, maybe you have to rethink whether you have to take this patient up for a trifocal IOL. That brings us to fine-tuning the operative part. The incision, you will not induce any astigmatism. That's the most important part. So the incision has to be temporal. It need not be at 0-180. It can be a little below or a little above. Stay within this zone. Do not go too much inferior or superior. The incision should be done in such a way that it is square, almost square, and it does not induce any astigmatism, nor does it induce any kind of a shift in the axis of the astigmatism too. A perfect incision can be done by marking I have developed a marker which makes a mark at the limbus and 1.25 millimeters into the cornea. This mark is clearly visible. So you can make a very, very accurate triplanar incision. Make a groove, enter, and enter at that point. 10 out of 10, you will get perfect incisions right through. We need a perfect capsulorhexis. It should be perfectly sized and central. If you have access to image guided system like Callisto or Varion, that would make your job very, very good. But if you don't have it, there's nothing lost. Simply mark 5.25 or 5.5 millimeter on the cornea. This mark will be fairly well seen, not a problem at all. Post, you do the incision. I prefer to do for all patients a soft shell technique. So this mark is very clearly visible, the beginning of surgery, and that can be used as a template to get a perfect central rhexis. You do not want these lenses to destabilize, tilt, or move in the postoperative period because of asymmetric contraction of the bag. A central rhexis with a perfect overlap is a good answer to prevent any kind of an overlap. Now coming back to the full surgery, we start off by making a proper rhexis. This is a image guided surgery, which gives you a beautiful template, which you can follow. The inner circle is 5.25, outer is 5.5. Stay somewhere in between. And you can end up with a perfect rhexis every time. And place the lens inside in the bag. Position it. In this case, it's a multifocal, it's a toric lens. Take out the viscoelastic from behind the lens and use the markerless system to align the lens in case you're using a toric. So you get the best results with these. So postoperatively, you should continue. Please continue the dry eye management. Recheck in case the person did not have dry eye to start with. Check if he or she is developing dry eye because of the operative procedure and the drops. Continue counseling. You have to handle these patients and keep going with all the doubts they have. Often, if there is a kind of a posterior capsular opacity that is left and there's a plaque there, you may have to early act to get the best results, because the minimum amount of posterior capsular opacity can affect these high-end lenses, particularly the multifocal and trifocal lenses. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. It was a very nice presentation. And now we will move on to the next presentation. Dr. Ramesh, sir, are you ready?
Yeah, you're in mute. Yeah,
Okay.
Arvind, yeah.
Yeah, Dr. Ramesh is a very famous cataract surgeon from Trichy. He is very well known across different conferences. His surgeries are out of this world. So he is a prolific user of trifocal lenses and extended depth lenses. He will be enlightening us and give us the guidance on choosing these extended depth of vision lenses to give presbyopic correction to our patients. Welcome,
Thank
sir.
Thank you, Arvind. But in this panel, we all know Arul sir has been one of inspiration for all of us, and I should never forget that I learned my basic phaco from him. So if not for him, I don't think I would have been in this platform at all. And as all the speakers have really covered things in a very exclusive, beautiful way. But we are still exploring. We want the challenge lies with the optical scientists and the material engineers to give us an unaberrated optical imagery at all distances. And it's more an art than science. We need to do a lot of thing to analyze before we choose a patient for the surgery. Lifestyle needs, personality dynamics, ocular pathology, vision goals, biometry, very beautifully handled by Dr. Preeti. As you all know, we don't have a good biometry, then whatever good a surgery you're going to perform, it's all going to go hayway. And choose the right formula, what works best in your hands. We have a lot of options available. So nothing much we really very much we discuss in detail about that. but be sure about what technology you're using, and prior to that, get used to the similar technology and then get into the multifocal and trifocal scenario. And this is the most important key. And I strongly feel here, being coming out of the school of Dr. Arul sir, I think multifocal, trifocals, I think it's always the final word for the surgeon himself has got the most important say than anything else. That's very, very, very important key. Don't allow it to your counselor to do it. That's the most important, because certain smaller catches like driving in night time, lot of unrealistic expectation we can catch from the patient's conversation with us. And we need to know a lot about this neuroadaptations, be prepared for enhancement if it is really required. And a lot of things have been dealt with the photic phenomenon. What are the factors that can compromise the surgical outcome? Significant astigmatism. Now we have trifocal with astigmatic correcting lenses, which is really amazing. And as rightly said by sir, like the photic phenomenon is dramatically come down with the present scenario lenses. So we need to believe and start proceeding to do it. Again, listen. The more the time we spend preoperatively with these patients, we are going to get a beautiful outcome. Most of us are excellent surgeons. So this is the one area we need to really focus very much on. Understand the lifestyle needs and visual expectations, and amount of time spent on each, and which is more important to you. So understand the work and leisure activities. These are the ones that really irritate them. And a lot of corneal pathologies need to be avoided. Aberrations, everything has been talked in depth in the previous speakers. I am not going to go into the details of which. And one thing, basically, I'm also a pediatric ophthalmologist, strabismologist. When it comes to a binocular function, see, we all know like it's better to avoid multifocal in a large angle alternating strabismus, but I will not say it's an absolute contraindication, maybe a relative contraindication, because they may not enjoy the binocularity. And hyperopes with small esotropes, many times we may miss them. There's a condition called microstrabismus, microesotropia. Sometimes they can be amblopic, so there may be a catch. So the patient may not improve a good beyond 612 or something like that. So they may become a bit unhappy. If you are very sure that they have had amblyopia from childhood, these are the eyes which we need to avoid. And one-eye patients, because of loss of contrast, maybe again I'll say it's only a relative contraindication, not an absolute contraindication. So basically, it's a summation benefit of simultaneous binocular multifocal vision that will be absent in these cases. But just have a look at these things also. Always do biometry for both eyes, even if you are going to operate on only one eye. That's more essential, because you can pick up some anisometropias, difference in the refractive errors. All these conditions can be picked up when we do a bilateral biometry. That's a very, very important thing in this selection criteria. And many times these are always being discussed, like which patient we need to choose. So the ability to perform common near activities, those criticals is advantageous for these patients. Always have a bystander with by. Many times we think it may not have any importance, but then sometimes the patient may take back their words and they may try to make an argument with you when something goes wrong. And this we all know. And the pupillary abnormalities. And I have some experience with Panoptix lens from Alcon, and I have an experience with some Biotech trifocal lenses also. Most lenses are really good, and I have very limited experience with EDOF lenses, but then, and they have a special technology called this Enlighten technology. And now, since now the whole world has gone into the zooming concepts, so almost everyone with a basic knowledge about entering into computers, they all depend upon, and we all need to be how to operate computers. And that's where this trifocal technology comes into play, where considering the multifocals where distant and near vision were good, here the intermediate vision is also taken care of. And there are some advantages in these type of lenses where the central button is a bit larger, so slight decentration is always can be taken care of. And this is the difference of the previous generation bifocal, multifocal lenses compared to the Panoptix lenses. And not much to go into the technological part of it. See, these are the larger diaphragmatic zone is a big advantage. The smaller zone comprises near and intermediate vision in dim light and large people. The larger zone comprises of distant vision in mesopic conditions. So this helps in all three distant visions. And always surgery, sir is very well mentioned in his steps. We need to have, starting from the incision, it should be a very nice square-edged incision, and every step has to be very meticulous, whatever may be the type of lens cataract you are going to handle on. Many times, multifocal lenses, people coming may not be the ones, the very nice PCC or a simple cataract. We may encounter harder cataracts, brown ones, and rhexis marking. Always you can have a marking, rhexis marking over a cornea. So we need to have a very good overlap. Whatever the surgeon is used to, a manual one or a markerless, whatever devices, but be very perfect on your rhexis marking. A perfect centered rhexis is always very essential. And wherever required, dye to be injected, because you may have when you're operating on a Timmerson lens, and these are the areas where like we may go wrong with the rhexis. The perfect central.
Dr. Ramesh sir, please unmute yourself. You are muted.
Yeah, is it okay?
Yeah, fine, sir.
Meticulous polishing of the posterior capsule is essential, because these can result in unhappy patients in immediate post-op. So we may be a bit hesitant to do a YAG cap for the fear of subtle CME and all such complications which do not want to happen in a high-tech patients. What's happening here? And visco wash from underneath the IOL, that's the most important thing, because we want to have a good adhesion between the lens and the posterior capsule. And if there is an anterior capsular tear, are we going to go ahead? Yeah, maybe in simple trifocal lenses, yes, still we can go ahead with the surgeon, it's a surgeon decision, but maybe controversial in case of a trifocal toric lens. Smaller ZDs, spiraling of rhexis. For the want of time, I'm just skipping these videos. Is PCR a contraindication? Maybe if it's very well managed, maybe still it can be still performed and still be able to place the lens in the back. Small eccentric PCR in this case, well managed. PC dehiscence, if we are good enough, we can still perform a posterior PCCC and still we can implant the lens in the back. And a long time back, my dad, he's an ophthalmologist, 82 years, very happy having a latest technology implant. And the reading speed of one patient, I still remember the moment she came out of the operation theatre OR, she just suddenly started reading her own this thing. I just recorded this. So patient's testimonial. And so that's it. Like that's experience I just want to share with you. Thank you again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for your nice presentation. Dr. Preeti, do you want to finish your slides?
Yes.
Yeah, please
if
go
you have
ahead.
time, I will go ahead.
Yeah, please go ahead. Finish those slides.
Yeah. 1 second, I'll reach to that point. So we were just, I got disconnected because of heavy rains. I think you'll be even able to hear the rain sound actually. So just finished about the axial length measurement. About the different type of keratometry we have. So I was explaining that we should know the difference between the keratometry of each of the IOL master or the optical biometry which we possess to fine tune the same, and the topography or the keratometry or even the IOL scan itself has to be done because before instilling any drops into the eye. Where if a patient is wearing a contact lens user 3 weeks prior, or else we will be losing our cases in today's scenario. And we should always make sure that it is corneal astigmatism, and the zone of measurement, as I said, we should be knowing. Am I audible, Dr. Arvind? Am I still connected?
You are breaking. Maybe
The
try
sources
switch
of
off
error
your,
is keratometry.
no, just switch off your video and then just keep talking. It may be useful. Please go ahead. Share your screen.
I think we can take there she comes. How many more minutes do we have left, Aravind?
We have almost 17 minutes left. I have one small conclusion thing.
Okay.
Post-operative management. I just thought she can finish. So
So these are the sources of errors in keratometry. So we need to fix this before we finalize the errors, our measurements. And a note on posterior corneal power. Why is it so important? Because we will be underestimating or overestimating our toric IOL calculation if we are not taking into account these posterior corneal powers. And with this web source OCT and with the telecentric keratometry, we will be able to get the exact values of the power which we need to incorporate in the IOL calculation formulas. And the K reading validation, as we all know, if it's a post-keratorefractive surgery, is always repeat. If it's more than 40 or less than 40 or more than 47, we need to repeat it. Average corneal diameter more than 1D difference is there, we need to always repeat it. And if there is a difference between the corneal astigmatism by keratometry and recent clinical manifest refraction, we need to be alert and we need to repeat this. And these are all the various biometric measurements which is used by different formulas which are available, all the third and the fourth generation formulas. I'm just touching upon the IOL calculation formulas because that was not my topic of today. And the best formulas are definitely the latest generation formulas. Some of the formulas are available to us on the internet in specific websites. We do get the Holiday 2 incorporated in the IOL Master 700 for calculating the best possible implant, which is possible. And the most accurate prediction of post-operative refraction can be achieved with Barrett's formula. And the percentage of eyes predicted within plus or minus 0.5D was in Kane's formula was around 72%, and that is supposed to be one of the best now. And it gives us the lowest mean absolute error for short, medium, and long axial growths, and for the each IOL type which is assessed. Validation, again, we should know when we should repeat. And more than that, nowadays we have to talk about optimization of our own result. Any surgeon has to understand how to optimize his or her own result to put up the right constant in place. And Dr. Haigis has taken the optimization from 300 and odd surgeons, from which he has resigned his formula as well. And that Haigis 2 formula gives us a very good result, including in patients who have undergone refractive surgery. And as I said, the zero prediction error also depends upon pre-op assessment, as well as it depends upon the biometry, intra-op and post-op. Dr. Arun Marivarman sir told us about the ocular surface management, and we should know whether we are dealing with any inappropriate case as well. So, and we should identify the appropriate refractive target and aim for it. Other preoperative biometric error is certain things are very important. We need to correctly mark the IOL power on the case sheet, because though we get a lot of variance, unless we mark, the technician could mistake it. And the right data has to be fed for any online calculation, because if we mix up the K1 and K2, we are going to place it right in the opposite direction, which will take us by surprise, us and the patient. And intraoperative error, as was told, correct position, access verification in the bag, and centration has to be taken into account. So for my take home would be all tomo and topography IOL master has to be performed before installing any drops. Short eyes, post-keratorefractive, optical biometry is a mandate. Screening for refractive surgery is very important in this era because we may miss it if the patient doesn't have a flap or a scar. It could be just a PRK. And invest in better biometric devices. The crowd is premium. The adoption of non-contact technique and creative problem solving by biometrics will only give us the best result. Train our technicians. That is very less number of technicians are also important because more the technicians involved, the more the error source. Always cross-check your reading. Whatever they enter, we should also know what is happening, and we should keep tracking our outcomes. We need to calibrate the instrument and upgrade the software and upgrade the knowledge and apply in practice. Thank you very much. These are the references. And I would just like to conclude that we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence is not an act, but a habit. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Preeti.
Thank you.
Stop sharing your screen.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just finish my short presentation of part 2. So only thing is that how to manage like when we get into trouble. So the most important thing for success is, as other speakers have mentioned, are these things. Patient exclusion is the most important thing than inclusion, which I think I would emphasize very much. Which patient we should not do. And patient counseling, many people have already spoken about it. Training of paramedical staff to talk to the patient and explain to them is very, very important. And then IOL power calculation, which Preeti has done the right way. The 5 commandments to the successful implant is the right IOL, like based on the pupil size or, the mu values. We can choose the right IOL having a central larger diameter or smaller diameter, depending on whether they want good mesopic vision. So if you look at it, I find Zeiss having a good mesopic vision than the PanOptix lens, though both are trifocals. Whereas the Zeiss has a better reading, whereas PanOptix has a better intermediate vision. So then choose the biometry which you do normally. Don't change the biometry just for this one situation. Always choose the steepest K to do the surgery. IOL calculation should be always for 0. I prefer doing the surgery for the non-dominant eye first, because dominant eye, if you have glare and halos, people find it very difficult to adjust to it. If we do the surgery on the non-dominant eye, they find it better. As everybody mentioned, very, very important to have a good centration. One thing is, if you have any doubt on zonule, put in a CT or capsular tension ring. Just don't leave it, because over a period of time, there can be some decentration. Some doctors put in CTR for every trifocal patient. I have heard international talks, but I don't prefer that. I don't know about other people. This is one of the best centered IOL which you can see on the Purkinje images taken at the slit lamp, very, very nicely centered. So when you look at these photopsias, these are all expected. But when I looked at the studies and reports, all our clinical experience suggests trifocals have lesser dysphotopsias than multifocals. But all the studies are showing that dysphotopsias are the same as multifocals, many of the reputed studies. So it definitely not seems to be lesser, at least from the international standpoint. But clinically, we find definitely trifocals have better performance in these criteria. So subsides over a period of time. There is neuroplasticity. Definitely it is there. Now neuroplasticity is a very proven phenomenon. This one is very, very important. Edge effects. This happens, like when you leave the square-edged design lenses, especially hydrophobic. If the rexes don't cover the edge of the lens, you get these edge effects. Again, this is very important that the rexes covers the sides. The edge effect is more common in myopes because they have a larger eye and then larger pupil size, more chance of reflection. There are some studies which have shown that definitely there is brain plasticity for these dysphotopsias. MRI has shown that there is neural adaptation, and that happens over a period of 6 months' time, and the patient's vision, symptoms, everything improves. But sometimes nothing works. Patient will keep saying, like, when will I see clearly? The only word we can use is when I stop practicing. So once you look at the trifocal implant, post-operative, it is very important, as Dr. Ramesh pointed out. He asked some patients to read the same time. When you do that, the wow factor gets into their patient head and then they start to feel better. They don't care whether they are 6/6 or N6. So normally I don't, check the vision. I just talk to the patient if they are happy. If they are very happy, I just take vision till 6/9 and then just leave it. I don't look at whether they are 6/6 or N6. They are very happy. I have given them good distance and reading, just leave it. Don't push for the other eye. If you talking about the other eye too much, then they might, tell like this eye is having problem and so on. If you can fix for both eyes simultaneous, well and good. The refractive error tolerable is up to 0.5 diopters. In many defocus curve, they have seen up to 1 diopter cylinder, it is tolerable. Higher cylinder in preoperative, if you identify better, use a toric lens as Dr. Arulmozhivarman sir suggested. Eyes pierce about 1 need a correction. So there are different options. There are some options like Sulcoflex, which I have used in 2-3 patients, and laser is an important option. The choice of removing and replacing the lens is, we have to consider, think 3-4 times before doing that, because we have to be very careful about the endothelial cell count also, because when we remove and replace a lens, we may lose more endothelial cells than doing the surgery. And poor endothelial count can itself cause increased contrast losses and problems, which might aggravate the already problematic trifocal patient. So whatever we do, we might come to this situation. I want to end up with this interesting video. So we are using these lenses. We are playing with these lenses.
Video is not visible.
Arvind, your video is not playing.
Not visible.
You're not done a screen sharing.
Oh. I'm sorry. One second.
Arvind, you have to play your video.
Sir, it shows
Freeze
like
it, and then screen share.
it is saying I'm not connected. I don't know why.
No, you play the video, freeze it, pause it, then you screen share. Come on, stop the screen sharing.
I'm not able to open the Zoom meeting itself. So that's the problem
We
here.
can see you. You're on.
But you're still inside the Zoom.
We can see you.
So meanwhile, can we take some questions, sir?
Yeah.
So
Yes, please.
I'd like to know the experience of the panelists on the experience on refractive lens exchanges and what lens they would prefer, and about pediatric implants for the trifocal IOLs. Dr. Arul could take the question first.
Okay, now why would you do a lens exchange? You would do that if your either toricity or the sphere is completely off the mark. Yes, we can do a lens exchange, which is fine, no problem at all. But I would rather do a touch-up with an examer laser, which is much simpler. The results are equally good because you're not dealing with any high refractive error, unless there's a problem with a wrong lens have been implanted by mistake. So the lens exchange by itself would usually be a person who's absolutely intolerant to photic phenomena and demands that the photic phenomenon should disappear. Then you're forced to take it out and put a monofocal. Thankfully, I've never done that. Personally, I've done the reverse. I've taken out monofocal, put multifocal. But I know that at least one of my patients had gone elsewhere and removed his multifocal, got a monofocal in. So it works both ways.
Pediatric cases, sir?
Pediatric, yes, I am a big fan of putting even toric trifocal in a pediatric. What I mean, when I say pediatric, I'm not talking about infants. If the child is over 3 or 4 years old, I prefer to put it this. Yes, you're going to have a change in power over a period of time, but this child is going to go only myopic Reading is never affected from day one. You can always do a PRK or a LASIK or a SMILE in essence later. So if the age of the child is over 3 or 4 years old, I'm all for putting in a multifocal lens. This may not be accepted by some or by most, but I'm there for it.
Sir, you would have seen putting multifocal in children. So have they grown, and what about the refractive error they develop over a period of time? What will be your choice?
A child who you put in a multifocal, trifocal at the age of 5, till the age of around 8 or 9, they have excellent vision. They do not have any refractive change, most of them. But starting somewhere between 8, 9, and 11, they start going into myopia. The myopia can be as high as 3, 4, or 5. No problem. Give them a single vision glass. They're not wearing bifocals. The only single vision glass takes care. The child hits 18. Everything is stable. You can put in a sulcus-based lens or do a PRK or do a SMILE or a LASIK. No problem.
Ramesh sir, what is your opinion? Because you do a lot of pediatrics.
Yeah, as sir rightly said, for an infant, certainly no. But somehow now, I never personally had any experience of implanting an multifocal or trifocal lens in a kid. But one thing rightly said by sir, like the one thing we always need to look for is the myopic shift. 100% it's going to happen. And the myopic shift is going to get the near vision better. That's what the point sir was highlighting. And probably the good aspect of myopia is like they're going to be, the near vision is going to be really good. So they don't land up with amblyopia. One key factor maybe one should always have in mind is the age of visual maturity in children is roughly around 8 years of age, the visual cortex. So the amblyogenic age is that critical age. That's where we need to have the aggressive refractive management. Maybe in case even someone puts in a multifocal, trifocal lens in a kid, age of 3 or 5, the monitoring of the distant and near vision to at least to the age of 8 and keep it going. If there is any unilateral cataract, patching the other eye, all such regular measures, I think it should be done. But personally, done, we have torics, but never had a multifocal scenario. Yeah. So.
Dr. Kumaran, do you have any choice of trifocals for any specific patient? For say a patient A, you will choose this trifocal. For a patient B, you will choose another trifocal.
See, normally most of these trifocals do well. I've had an experience with Indian as well as the other one from abroad. But ideally, it is better to choose a trifocal whose central ring is larger, as Dr. Arul had said. There are a few IOLs normally comes around 1.6 central zone, but there are a few IOLs who also come with 1.7. So always I would like to go for a trifocal, which is a larger central diameter. So that would be my preference. Otherwise, I don't have any specific techniques, but the hybrid lenses which are coming in with both the trifocal and the EDOF technology, I think they are very promising, and that's the way to go.
Okay, good. Nikhil, are you here? Can we have a photograph?
Yes, sir. Immediately, I'll take one.
Yeah. So all the speakers will have a photograph. Normally, it would have been nice if we have met and exchanged a few words. At least that we are seeing our faces through the internet.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Hey, wait for the photograph.
Yes.
We are in Chennai, Kumaran. We have not met for a long time.
At least 3 of you are in Chennai and 1 in Hyderabad.
Everything is same, sir. Even next door, we don't meet.
Fear of COVID, yeah.
Is the photo done?
I'm not sure. Like, are we seeing this?
Yes, the photo is done. Yes, the photo is done. Already
Good.
sent to Dr. Priyam. Dr. Priyam would then send it to all of you as well.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
okay. Nice of you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Arul sir. Thank you, Ramesh sir.
Thank you.
Dr.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thanks for joining this presentation.
Thank you, Arvind. Thank you, Kumaran, for the
Thank you, sir.
last
welcome,
reminder.
sir.
Thank you.
Preeti, take care, Preeti. Bye.
Thank you, sir. You
Bye.
too. Bye,
Bye.
sir. Thank you all.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you,
sir.
Kumaran.
Nikhil,
Yes, sir.
as usual,
Thank you.
thanks for your help. May I
Thanks
make
to
this
the
happen?
AV team.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.